Welcome to Thank the Maker. We are broadcasting live from the top of Bush House Southeast in the heart of London. And today we've got a really special guest. We've got Eliza Hatch, founder, creator of Up Luv, here in the studio today. So we'll be talking with her over the next hour about creativity, what the project's all about, and really anything else that comes up. So stay tuned. We'll be right back with you in just a moment. Welcome back. Good morning to Eliza. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. And also in the studio, for the first time ever, we've got Clements, our producer.
That's me. Hi. Yeah. Good morning.
How are you doing,
everyone? I'm doing great.
Awesome. So Eliza, thank you so much for coming on the show. We really appreciate you being here. How are you doing this morning? How was your commute here? Just to start there.
It was good. It was good. Been pretty busy. Got back from Bristol last night.
Brilliant.
I've been kind of all over the place.
Yeah. Are you doing like a university tour right now?
Kind of.
Cool.
Yeah. I'm back in the UK for like a week and like 2 weeks. So I've been doing a kind of university speaking tour.
Right.
Obviously, because it's like International Women's Day and month. And so I've been speaking to lots of different universities about my work with Up Luv. So yeah, it's been busy.
Amazing. And probably tiring too. Like, are you speaking every day to different people? Are you doing Q&As?
Yeah, lots of different things. I've been going into some small classes and doing kind of seminar type work. And then I've been doing, speaking to like feminist societies. And then last night was more of sort of like an event with a, stage, mic, keynote, the whole shebang.
Fantastic.
So, and then I'm doing like panels and live podcasts, so it's all just really different and kind of interesting, and keeps me
and you were based out of London for a period of time, is that correct?
Yeah, I'm from London. I grew up in London, and I lived in London for like 24 years. Well, no, apart from going to university in Brighton, but I moved to New York now.
What did you study at Brighton?
Where did I study? Or
what did you study? What was
I studied illustration and graphics, which is not what I do now, obviously. But it was a really broad course. It was more kind of like a visual communications course. So I could do anything I liked, really. It was like, illustrate this in any way you can, whether that's like film, print, media, set design. So I ended up doing, photography and set design and all of that kind of stuff. And
fantastic.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, before we get too much farther into it, if I could ask that you give like an introduction to Up Luv and kind of what it is.
Yeah.
Because it took me a minute to figure out what it was, because its title on its own, I love it, and the story kind of behind it. But it takes some revealing. So if you wouldn't mind, in your own words,
totally.
What is the project?
So Up Luv is a photojournalism campaign that I began in January 2017 that retells women's accounts of sexual harassment. I called the project Up Luv because of a comment that was made to me one day when a man walked past me and told me to cheer up. It wasn't the first time I'd heard that phrase. I'd been told to smile, or I'd look so much prettier if I smiled, or cheer up, or, all of those kind of things. I'd heard it many times before. So it was kind of like a catalyst to get me questioning all of the kind of things that a woman can experience on like a daily basis and just brush off and ignore. And to be clear, because I've had so many people like comment about this, it's not just a project about being told to cheer up.
Right.
That's just the tip of the iceberg. It's kind of showing a scale of all of the things. So the stories that I retell all happen in a public place and range from anything from being told to smile, to being followed home, to being catcalled, to being touched up in a nightclub, the list goes on. So it really it's like it encompasses a broad spectrum of things.
Yeah, no, it's great. And I read some comment somewhere in some article about how kind of starting at that level makes it really unifying because everybody's experienced that level.
Totally. And that's also one of the funny things about it is that when I started the project and I started asking people to be involved, to share stories, I initially began with just speaking to my close friends and just kind of asking about their experiences. And then when I started asking that question, I found a lot of people saying like, oh, I don't think anything that bad's have happened to me. Or, oh, I don't think I can share anything. I don't think it's serious enough. And then to that, I would say, well, has anybody ever, catcalled you or like beeped their car horn at you or shouted something obscene around a moving vehicle or touched you without your consent or a bar or in a club or, just made you feel sexually vulnerable or uncomfortable in a public space? And then every single person will be like, oh, yeah, well, like every day, like constantly, I just didn't think that counted.
Yeah.
So then I would have to be like, yes, that counts. That shouldn't be happening. Yeah.
Of course. And how does the project manifest? Because I know you have your Instagram account, but you've also got your website, and I'm sure you've got exhibitions and other things. What is, you tell these stories, you take these photos, but like, what is the product, if you will? So
the process of what I do is that I interview the woman about her experience, and then we meet in a place that's relevant to her story. Whether that place is like basically we visit the place that she was harassed, whether that's a bus stop, a train carriage, a busy street, a marketplace, like anywhere. And then we use that location as a stage for her to speak out about her experience. It all depends on the story and the person I'm meeting. Obviously, going back to the exact same place can be triggering for some people. So if it's just like a similar location, or, we meet in the middle and do something that's just going to make, the woman I'm photographing feel comfortable.
Right.
So it's a process and it's different with every person. But ultimately, the project is about revisiting the place that person was harassed.
Yeah.
And then after I take the photograph, I post it on Instagram and my website. And then since then, the project has branched off into workshops and exhibitions and lectures and all sorts of things.
Right. Yeah. It's a fantastic project and like an awesome kind of safe space on one hand for women to share these experiences, but also it's like a really cool tool to engage and like share these stories on a broader platform. And that kind of leads me to my next question. How do you balance that, right? So when I was looking at the Instagram account, you see in the comments, so many comments that are like, oh my God, same thing happened to me. Thank you for speaking out. But what you don't see so many comments is like, at least in my brief overview, and it's probably just the nature of it, are people kind of engaging across, like in a dialogue, so to speak.
Yeah.
So I guess how do you balance creating a safe space versus engaging people that might not be aware of these sort of happenstances?
No, I am quite aware sometimes that I'm like sort of, shouting into a bubble of people who are all agreeing.
I guess that's the crux of it. Is like, how do you break out of that bubble?
Yeah, it's interesting because every time I do break out of that bubble, it's quite scary.
Yeah. No, I was looking at a BBC interview and I looked at the comments.
Don't get me started on the BBC.
Yeah.
So when the project first started generating press about a couple of years ago, I would get hundreds and hundreds of messages from women and men alike, and lots of women sharing their stories, lots of men. There were a huge range of things. I've had men calling me a, witch, feminazi, man-hating, whatever. I've also had men apologizing for their past behavior in email. I've had fathers concerned about their daughters emailing me. I've had all sorts. I've had backlash, obviously. I've had women, messaging me saying like, oh, this happened in my day, but just got to stiff upper lip and this isn't the worst of our problems and do something better with your time kind of vibe. And then, thankfully on my Instagram, it's kind of like a sort of safe haven space where it's all very positive and the messages I get are very positive, encouraging, and it is just a lot of fun of like women finding solidarity with one another, and also, a fair load of men as well being kind of like educated and being allies and all of that. But as soon as there's any form of like large scale press, like the BBC feature, for instance, I just don't read the comments anymore because they are quite harrowing. Even like the few that managed to slip through, and the private messages that I got from that, I was just like, oh God.
Yeah. My question is, what do you think that speaks to? Because like, and I think this is a common trend in what you've reported on, is in circles of men, like, we don't see this side of women's experiences.
Yeah.
And I feel like a common comment is like, wow, I never knew this occurred. Like, what? So I guess the question is like, how do you take back control of this narrative and kind of inform men and get them involved in the conversation, but also like, I don't even like, where does this come from? I guess these are a bunch of random questions, but why are these comments like this? I guess let's start there. Why are there so many comments when it goes public?
I guess because of the kind of sensationalized, clickbaity way it's presented, and the way, because I think the title of my project is quite provoking because it's instantly men feel attacked, I think, even though it's not supposed to be attack, and it's not an attack, and it's never about blaming men. My project's just about sharing stories of women, right? You know? I've got absolutely not picking a bone. I'm trying to just raise awareness, right. But I think something about the name Cheer Up Luv and me telling my story about how that triggered the whole thing, I think some people find it like an attack on them in this way that's like, oh, well, can I not flirt anymore? Is like, why can't you take a compliment? And I think a lot of people feel threatened maybe by the fact that. So
how do you combat that narrative, or do you even see that as your role?
I mean, I get that quite a lot anyway with like men I speak to in my in my day-to-day life, being like, oh, well, you know, well, this just the death of, you know, chivalry, and are we not allowed to hold doors open for women anymore? And I'm like, you know, holding the door open for a woman is very different from than slapping her on the arse. If you can't fundamentally see the difference between those two things, then I think that is the key problem here. But yeah, I've had many comments of people be kind of like, well, you know, is this going to be the death of flirting? And can you not just speak to someone in the public anymore or any of that? And I'm like, of course you can speak to people in public, of course you can flirt, of course you can have interactions with other people, just do it in a respectful way. It's got nothing to do, it's not about closing down the lines of communication between the genders. It's not about being like, oh, women do not want to be spoken to by men anymore. It's women do not want to be harassed, which are fundamentally like very different things. And it's just about, I guess, educating on where that line is and the difference between wanted and unwanted attention.
Yeah, I think that's a really key kind of pivotal point, and I haven't really even thought about it through that frame as well. That's really interesting. One cool project that I was reading about, kind of a spin-off of Cheer Up Luv, and I think you're doing it in other places now too, is your experience in Sri Lanka. Yeah. That's really cool. Do you want to talk about that at all?
Yeah, totally. So in 2018, I was approached by the United Nations Population Fund, and they are a branch of the United Nations who deal with kind of like all gender-based violence and issues towards women in developing countries, and I think just any country actually. And basically they did a study in 2017 and found that 90% of women experience sexual harassment on public transport in Sri Lanka, with only 4% ever reporting it to the authorities. And this number was, you know, so staggering that it's affecting the economy. Women were not wanting to go to work, or were going to work 2 hours late to avoid rush hour just because of the harassment, you know, was so bad. And for a lot of women, you know, public transport is the main and only kind of form of transport that you can get, because, you know, having your own car or a private car is extremely rare and it's expensive, and you have to rely on a man, obviously. So, well, not obviously, but like in Sri Lanka, it is more often than not a man who will be the owner of like a vehicle.
And that actually brings me to an interesting question. So when you go abroad and go to countries that are like non-Western rooted in their ideology, how do you balance kind of this activist movement that you want to bring about with kind of, I'm sure some people would cast it as like Western imperialist. You're coming in with your Western views and imposing it on I'm not saying that you're doing that, but like, how do you be cognizant of that?
No, I felt very conscious of that totally when I was doing the project in Sri Lanka. I didn't want to just be this, because there was obviously like the Me Too movement was happening all around the world.
Yeah.
Hadn't reached Sri Lanka yet. Don't think it is going to like incredibly soon, but the notion of, you know, speaking out about sexual harassment and any kind of gender-based violence and stuff is extremely stigmatized, and there's a lot of shame surrounding it, and a lot of victim blaming. So when we came in with this huge kind of Western, like, yeah, just speak out and, you know, let's do it on Instagram, I think I probably was coming from a lot more of a naive place originally than I thought. And actually there was a big backlash when we released the project, because nothing like this had really been done on that scale before, of like women telling their stories directly to camera about their experiences. And we released the whole thing on, you know, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and it was a huge global campaign. It was viewed by more than like 10 million people. Wow. So it was massive, but there was also a massive backlash in Sri Lanka, because a lot of men just hadn't seen anything like that before. They called, you know, all of the women paid actors, actresses, and they, you know, accused us as the whole thing as being, you know, feminist propaganda. And I mean, the list goes on of all of the kind of like issues that we encountered when we released it, that I'm not going to lie, I definitely was naive to before we started it, before going into it. But it was extremely eye-opening, because it just, I mean, a lot of amazing things can happen from the campaign. It inspired so many people to speak out, and it really started a national dialogue about the issue. But it also highlighted another issue of the online harassment that you can face from speaking out. And it kind of shows why the reporting is so low. You know, the 4% of the population reporting any form of harassment. And it was very clear that in all of the women who we spoke to, you know, absolutely nobody felt that there was a safe place that they could report it to, or that they would be listened to. Because ultimately, if anyone, well, of the women that we did speak to, the ones that did, you know, speak out or kind of make a scene or whatever, tried to address the issue as it was happening, they were the ones who were told to leave the transportation. They were the ones who were blamed. It was their fault. So it's really hard. Yeah. To get taken seriously, to get the issue taken seriously, for it not to just be this whole kind of, you know, well, you were wearing that dress, or it was because you were wearing makeup, or you shouldn't be traveling alone, or what did you think was going to happen if you took public transport? So it's a pretty hard mentality to shift.
One thing I do like about this project, and I think is good in combating that, is that you do give the story and the words to the affected person. It's not like you're speaking for these people.
Yeah, true. I forgot to answer your actual original question.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I think that that's just the brilliant tool of the project, and the way it's set up is that it is,
that was always
speaking for themselves.
Yeah, that was always like my intention when I started it. I didn't want to have myself in the forefront of the project, right? Being kind of like, you know, I'm going to be the woman to talk about this issue. I wanted to give the microphone to somebody else. I wanted to create just a platform and a space for women to confide and share their stories and stuff. And I wanted it to be their voices that carried the project. And I almost kind of wanted to hold a sort of curator position. Yeah. You know, being kind of, almost like creating this like gallery of women and their stories.
That's really interesting. And it kind of takes me to another question I've had, and you kind of answered it, but like, and this is kind of a shift, but when you're building a project like this, especially on a platform like Instagram, like brand kind of does take a central focus and making a consistent look and feel, but that almost feels kind of like antithetical to the stories you're telling, right? So like, how is brand important to Cheer Up Luv? Getting a consistent like framework, framing it kind of like a museum and a curation is a really novel concept, but how do you think through that?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely has a look for me. I shoot everything on film, and I kind of pick the locations quite carefully, I would say. Yeah. All of the kind of shots are quite considered. I've always kind of got into it with a kind of like wanting the backgrounds and stuff to look like sets almost that the women are kind of standing in. And I tried to make it kind of like as colourful and as bright as possible. So when you are scrolling through it, you're not your first thought isn't kind of like, well, what is this kind of like miserable group of women all screaming on the internet? It's like, oh, these are bright, colourful photos. What's going on here? And then you're kind of there's almost a conflict of the image you're seeing and then the story you're reading. Obviously, the women aren't smiling or frowning in particular in all of the photos. I kind of tried to keep it very not like deadpan, but like what's it called, like expressionless almost. Neutral, that's the word. I try to keep it quite neutral, but the locations and colors are quite like vibrant and bright, so there is a conflict of the kind of story you're reading and the picture you're seeing, but I think it kind of works.
That's really cool. And like, why film? Why and even in like some of the short films you took in Sri Lanka, they're all on film.
They're all on 16mm film. Yeah.
Why that choice?
It's a combination of things. It's how I work anyway as a photographer. I'm just kind of in love with film. It's the medium. It's my medium basically. But there's also a kind of a way of it's being able to be in the moment, I suppose, with the subject. And there's a kind of a consideration, and there's just, I don't know, I just prefer working with film, really.
Yeah. No, I mean, the permanence of it as you're kind of filming and, like you got this one shot.
It's basically like that. Like, you only have a certain amount of shots. You have to be really kind of in the moment and really think about like, what you want this shot to be and stuff. And it gives you, a lot of time to really focus on what you want the image to be. And I like that.
Yeah, it looks good at the end of the day as well.
Yeah, and there's that. But also, it's a process. I just really enjoy it. I like developing it and scanning it and editing it. It's a nice process for me.
So my next question is, what do you consider yourself? Do you consider yourself, like, what would you label yourself? An artist, an activist, an advocate?
God, so many slashes.
Yeah, what's like number one, though? What would you jump to? That doesn't just encompass Cheer Up Luv, but like you as an artist and an individual.
I mean, I say I'm a photographer and an activist because I don't consider myself any of the thing. I mean, ultimately, I suppose if you were going to really, kind of umbrella term, I would say I'm an artist. If I was just speaking to someone who had no idea about anything, I would just say I'm an artist. I still suffer from this like weird imposter syndrome where I can't just be like, I'm a photographer, because I didn't like study photography. I was completely self-taught. Yes, it's my profession now and it's my career, and I am a photographer, but I still definitely suffer from imposter syndrome where if I was just to be like, I am a photographer, I mean, I do say that obviously, and I am, but I like to say I'm a photographer and an activist because it gives me more of a kind of, it encompasses what I actually do more.
Right. No, it totally makes sense. Yeah. And kind of on that vein, and this is kind of like broader theoretical talk, but do you think that you as an artist, and really any artist out there, like has a obligation to be an activist in a way? Because a lot of art is, speaking for things or people that aren't spoken for. Do you think the two are interlinked? Obviously they are linked for you, but like on a broader scale, do you see them as like very intertwined?
I mean, that is interesting. I think it is going that way a lot more these days with the like rise of Instagram and other platforms and stuff, making it easier to kind of speak to an audience and find a community who will kind of, share your views and your, I guess, the sentiments you're trying to portray through your art. But I don't necessarily think there is like an obligation to have to say something and to do something with your art, because, at the end of the day, that's a lot. That's people create for different reasons.
Right. Yeah.
But for me, I found that it gives me purpose and passion in what I do, to have kind of something, a driving force behind it, and something that I am really that affects my personal life, and it's something that I'm really passionate about.
Do you think that like all of your projects going forward will be infused with this activist social movement infusion?
I mean, that would be great.
Yeah.
Ideally, it would be amazing to do things that have a kind of, that have like activism roots in it, and have a kind of, you're doing it for a greater good and a cause, and something that you're really, passionate about. But, also beggars cannot be choosers, and I got to make money.
For sure. Do you consider yourself a creative person? This is the question I bring up every single time I interview people, because I always find people's responses quite interesting. But do you consider yourself a creative person? In general? Yeah. Do you find that it infuses your work? Do you, when you approach a project, are you thinking about how can I make this creative, or how do you think about?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, everything. The way I kind of approach anything is visually first, and it always has been. I've always kind of, since day one, have just come from everything from an artistic kind of point of view. It's the way that I can map things out, is just to do it visually. So yeah, I definitely say that I would approach any kind of project or anything with a kind of okay, how can I make this look good?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And you mentioned earlier you studied illustration?
Yeah, illustration and graphic design.
Right. And does that feed into what you're doing today at all?
Completely. Yeah, 100%. I think the reason I was even able to do Cheer Up Luv and make the project at all is because I studied a course which was really heavily focused on visual communication and being able to structure a brief and do self-directed projects. And for my whole 3 years at uni, especially my last year, it was all about kind of self-directed projects, and you would kind of come up with an idea of something you wanted to do and convey and make, whether that was a website or a book or a film, and then you kind of went about that in any way you wanted to do. So when I left and I started Cheer Up Luv, I think just a few months after I left uni, I actually started it from a place of wanting to do something creative, because I was working in a different field at that time. I was working in the art department for film and TV, doing set design.
Yeah.
And that was really amazing. I really loved doing that. But I was also kind of very much fulfilling someone else's creative vision, and that was amazing. But I kind of felt like I really wanted to do something for me. I want to have something on the side that I'm passionate about as well, so I can kind of get some creative fulfillment. And then obviously the Cheer Up Luv thing happened, and then those two things kind of collided, and I was like, right, okay, this is what I'm going to do. And when I first even started doing it, I wasn't thinking that it was going to be what it is now. I had no idea where it was going to go. I just knew I wanted to make this website, or collect these stories, and take these photographs and kind of see what it looked like. And then when I started collecting a few, I was like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. And I structured a brief, and I came up with really clear kind of guidelines almost for myself of what I wanted, of what my aims were, and what were kind of the things that were key to the project, and what things I knew I definitely didn't want it to be, and all of these kind of things. So yeah, my being able to have studied a visual communications course was pretty, I think, crucial to how I structured my project.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. The fact that you just approach it like that in the first place, that's cool. How do you not burn out? And I don't mean this not only from you're dealing with sensitive issues and really harrowing stories, but also you're going university to university, presumably giving the exact same pitch for the exact same project over and over and over again. How do you keep up the positivity? How do you keep up the energy? Do you see yourself moving on to another project? Let me keep it to one question. How do you keep it up? How do you not burn out?
Well, yeah, that's interesting. I mean, when I first started doing the campaign, I felt more of a burnout through the kind of intensity of all of these stories and stuff that I was hearing. When it comes to doing actual kind of speaking and stuff and these kind of events, I mean, it's obviously can be exhausting because you're traveling all the time, but you know, at the end of the day, it's my job and I love it. Like I really, really enjoy it. I get a kick out of talking and speaking, and, you know, I really enjoy it. But especially when I started the project and I started speaking to women and I started interviewing lots of women, and at one point I was interviewing a woman every single day, sometimes 2 women a day, and these people were strangers, so it was quite exhausting. Kind of, because each shoot, you know, was an hour to 2 hours long, and you were exerting a lot of kind of like emotional energy, making, like, my priority was always to make the women I'm photographing feel as comfortable as possible, and safe, and all of these, and in safe sharing their story, not that just because you don't want to just be, you know, someone on the other side of the camera utilizing their trauma for a picture on Instagram. So my priority was always to kind of go into it making the women feel safe and comfortable, and kind of making it like as fun as I could, as also because I wanted to keep it light, you know. And I wanted to make it like a fun experience, like having your photo taken, not just like, you know, retelling a story and all being sad. I wanted to be positive. So that was also a lot of energy. And I'm naturally an energetic person, and a talkative, like outgoing kind of on the extroverty side. So I really enjoy meeting and talking to people, and that's kind of why I could do the project. But then I would find myself on the Sunday of a week being like, oh my God, why can't I speak? Like I just suddenly just couldn't talk to my friends or my family, and I had no energy, and I just suddenly like, I just don't want to talk to anyone. I just want to like lock myself in my room and sleep. I'm so exhausted. And I realized I was like, I'm doing too much. I really need to slow down, because so I would get to a point where I'd be like, oh, I have a shoot tomorrow, and I would start, like, I could feel that almost like resentment of, not resentment, but just kind of like, oh God, you know, like just exhaustion, really. So I was like, you know what, I don't want to burn out. I really enjoy this. I don't want it to, like, it to start being a chore. You know, I want this to be enjoyable, and I want the people who I'm photographing and the stories that I'm sharing, I want them to be getting the most out of it as well. And I want, you know, so I had to really slow it down. So I do 1 photograph a week now. I try to, at least, because otherwise it's just too crazy and time consuming and emotionally draining.
I mean, that's what I keep going back to. I recently watched the Mr. Rogers movie, It's a Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. I don't know if either of you have seen this, but like one of the plot points is like, you talk to these children and you take on all their problems. Like, how do you keep such a cheery attitude day in and day out? Like, you're an emotional sponge. Yet and I see that as similar to you, like that taking on all these stories, even just from like a curating point of view, is, you're having to read it every day, whereas other people could just scroll past it on Instagram. Totally. And I do kind of feel the weight of it sometimes when I have a full inbox and I'm looking at my DMs and I've got lots of stories from women, and I encourage it. I want people to send me their stories. I want to repost their stories, and I always reply and I will always repost. But it will take me a few days sometimes, because sometimes I can see the inbox and I just feel a bit kind of like, I don't have the emotional energy in this moment, so I will leave this to tomorrow afternoon, and I will address it and I'll repost it. But sometimes it can be quite of an emotional toll. And the stories you're hearing, sometimes they're not all stories of street harassment. They range from everything from I've received really hard hitting stories of domestic abuse and rape and all forms of sexual assault. And so and also I sometimes feel like maybe I am not the most qualified person to be hearing some of these stories, and I feel sometimes like I'm not a qualified therapist and I studied an art degree. Like, what am I doing with this kind of thing? I feel like a responsibility almost to the people. But I realized that people don't want to send their story to you for life advice. They don't want to you're not providing a service for them. They just want to share. Like, these people just want to share their stories. They just want to be listened to, and they want to feel like they have like a voice. And obviously if people do send me like really tough and horrible stories, I automatically send them helplines and
websites that they should visit and people that they should talk to, because those people are qualified to help 100%. But when it comes to people sending in their stories of like sexual harassment and stuff, I think they just want to share. Like they just want to be heard. And then I worry less about having a social responsibility.
Fantastic. Well, really interesting stuff. We're going to take a little bit of a break. Typically, when we take a break, we ask our guests for a song recommendation to kind of fill that time. Do you have a song for us to put on, and why?
Okay, let's put on Robin Indestructible, because, it's Women's History Month and she's an amazing woman.
All right, this is Indestructible by Robin. Let's give it a listen, and we'll be right back in just a moment. All right, welcome back to Thank the Maker. That was Robin with Indestructible. Just to kind of move along with the questioning, what is next for you? Do you see yourself working on Cheer Up Luv for the foreseeable future? Is like this the be-all, end-all project for you, or do you have goals that are beyond it? I reckon it's kind of a difficult decision because you are providing a service in a way. You're providing public social service, but you have your creative potential and your goals. What does the future look like for Eliza?
I think it's going to be like a work-life balance of continuing Cheer Up Luv. Cheer Up Luv is going to be an ongoing thing and a platform which I have no intention of stopping anytime soon. I take it to different countries all around the world, so I'm planning on to continue doing that. It's been to Mexico, Sri Lanka, Tokyo, New York. I've actually moved to New York now. That's the kind of next stage in my life, in my professional life, my photography, Cheer Up Luv, my partnership with the United Nations, all of those things. So it's basically continuing Cheer Up Luv, working with collaborating with other people and projects and campaigns that I feel passionate about that come up along the way. And if anyone wants to collab, hit me up.
And you are in New York right now.
Yes.
How did that come about? Is this a part of Cheer Up Luv? And because I noticed, obviously, your photos have transitioned from the UK to Sri Lanka, and now they're in New York.
Yes.
Is this a part of the project? Is this a career decision for you?
Yeah. It's a career decision for me. I've always wanted to move. And when I started Cheer Up Luv and it started getting press and stuff, and I started to kind of get more freelance photography work off the back of that, it's given me the really amazing opportunity to work with some really great brands Apple, TEDx, Girls Talk, all these BBC, lots of people. So I kind of thought that maybe that would be a good opportunity to see if I could apply for an artist visa. Because I just I really wanted to pursue my photography and just creative general life career in New York. So I applied for an artist visa a year ago and I got it, which
Amazing.
Was very surprising. And it felt like quite a big achievement actually in the current state of things. Getting a visa to America is like, I didn't think it was going to happen, especially with the government.
Right. Yeah.
But I did, and I was like, okay, well, let's got to do it then.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, I'll just move. Didn't really have a plan, or I'm a freelancer, so I didn't have a contracted job I was moving to or anything. I just kind of making it up as I go along, really.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, I've had to have a very structured visa with lots of clients and projects and everything. Yeah. But a lot of it is just making it up as you go along. Yeah.
What's it been like for you to live in New York? Because London is obviously a creative hub, but New York is New York. What's the difference day to day like? Has it been a good career decision so far? How long have you been there?
I moved in September.
Okay.
So
not too long.
Not too long.
Yeah.
I guess almost 6 months.
Okay.
I think.
That's about how long I've been here in London as well. So
yeah, so I think it's been about 6 months. And I'm not gonna lie, the first 3 months was definitely me just getting set up on the ground over there because so much life admin.
Right.
Yeah, the first 3 months were definitely just like life admin /
Moving
how am I
countries is kind of a stressful thing.
am I gonna survive?
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot of it has just been like the bare bones of like, how am I going to pay my rent?
Right.
Which has been fine for me so far. I have just kind of been like, I'm just gonna survive and that will be great. I've been doing lots of different like collaborations and like personal projects and cheer up love things, and I've basically just been trying to grow my network out there of people that I can work with in the future. And a lot of that has been doing lots of like collaborations with brands and swaps, and just like reaching out to people on Instagram, being like, do you want to work together on a project? And do you want to shoot some stuff? And like reaching out to like fashion companies and all of this kind of stuff, and like going to exhibitions and just, you know, networking my ass off, basically. Yeah. So yeah, it's been a lot of that.
Cool. And I'm curious, and if you don't want to talk about this, you don't have to talk about this. But like, how do you generate income as a photojournalist, right? Like, to me, I don't even know where to start if I were to choose that career path. Are you doing mostly freelance projects? Well,
obviously, Cheer Up Love is completely non-profit. Yeah. It's not anything, like I've never made money from it apart from doing talks. Like that's the only way I really generate money from it. I have a GoFundMe, which if anyone wants to check out, they are more than welcome. I have a GoFundMe, but like it's you can't really profit off people's trauma, so it's not really like, oh, get your photo taken for £50.
Right.
It's always been a kind of like non-profit thing. So I make my income from doing public speaking, doing freelance photography, just, you know, like commercial stuff, editorial stuff, and my part-time job, which is very useful. If I didn't have my part-time job, I would probably have to move back in with my parents. And set design again. I'm doing some of that. I mean, I have like 4 jobs.
Amazing.
So it's not just one. There's no sort of like sole kind of thing that's giving me all my income. It's like tiny bits from everywhere.
Right.
Which I think is any freelancer creative in this like world is you know.
That's crazy to me that like you've been on this artistic journey and like now a large portion of your income is through public speaking. Like that's such an interesting
most of my income, I would say. But also it changes like month to month. Like for this month I'm making my rent through public speaking. Through the next month I will make it through my part-time job. Through the next month I'll make it through one photography gig. It's just like every week, every month is completely different, and which some people that would drive them insane, and they would have a nervous breakdown, just like the mere thought of like not knowing where your next paycheck's going to come from. And I would be lying if I said that it wasn't stressful at times.
Oh, for sure.
But I really enjoy it.
I mean, is it, obviously you're doing what you're doing, but do you ever think about like other career paths that like may have been more secure or something that you may have been interested in? What when you were kind of at A levels, I'm trying to think through the system. I don't know. But like, what were you deciding between?
I honestly
in terms of future careers?
Had no idea. I don't know what I would. Even when I was at university, I didn't know what I was going to be or do. There was never a time where I was like, okay, I could either be an artist or I could be a vet, or like I'll either, you know, I will do painting, or if this all goes tits up, I'll just do a law conversion and go into like there was never a backup plan for me. It's always been something creative. There was, even now, if everyone was like, if you just lost everything now and everything Cheer Up Love went tits up and everything just completely collapsed, what would you do? And be like, it's probably something else not very lucrative and creative.
Right.
Yeah.
Super interesting. I for a little bit of background on myself, I study global media industries here. And so a lot of what we talk about is like the precariousness of artists and people in the creative field. And so it's always interesting to talk to case studies, if you will, about like what that life is like. And it's like stressful and hard, but at the same time, this other message always comes through is like, I can't do anything else. I can't see myself do anything else.
It's true.
So super, super cool and interesting. This is a really big question. How do you define art? I'm always interested in people's definitions of like what art is and isn't. Some people consider all design art. Some people consider, only things that express something art. What is art to you? Think on it for a second if you need to.
That's quite a big question.
It's confusing. You go to the Wikipedia article on art and it's like visual, audio, performance. It like categorizes it.
Yeah, I guess art is just like anything the maker chooses to be art.
Interesting.
It's like creating something to be viewed as art. You could argue that just by creating something and being like, this is to be viewed as art.
Yeah.
Then that's what that is.
Yeah, and that answer comes up time and time again. I think it's a super compelling answer, but like basically, if you call something art, it is art.
Obviously, it's like there are varying degrees of it.
Yeah, sure.
Of what can be viewed as art. But when it comes from a maker, I think anything can be art. But like for me personally, when I see something, I will be like, okay, well, you may think that's art, but I'm not sure.
Where is the line for you? Because one thing that I talk about a lot is I think like game design, like just starting at like chess all the way up to like video games. I think that's a very artistic venture because, the maker is making choices about how the game progresses and like what kind of feelings you experience from playing.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I've had so many people challenge me on that. And
yeah, because then you could say that like obviously anything you create is art. So like, I designed this water bottle, that is art.
Yeah.
Or like I made this game, that is art. Or like I wrote this piece, that is art. But then some people would say like, oh well, like a book, like that is art. Whereas like a short essay or like an article for a newspaper, like that's not art, that's just like journalism or something. And you're like, well, where is the line? I think the line is just really like how you perceive something to be viewed, which sounds really wanky, but
it's kind of what art is.
So that's what it is.
Yeah, it's difficult, and like there's this discourse of people referring to like super skilled craftsmanship as art as well, and it's all over the place, but I'm always
I guess it's the setting, isn't it, that it's put in. You could just, if you made a lovely pot and you put it in someone's kitchen and it was used every single day, it probably wouldn't be viewed as art. You'd think like, oh, that's a nice pot, but it had a different use. Whereas if you put it in a gallery space and everybody looked at it, you'd be like, well, this is what this is for. This is to be looked at. This isn't to be used. That's art.
Yeah.
So I guess it's the use, it's the setting, it's the intention. There's lots of factors.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. That's interesting. I could talk about it for days.
Yeah. Never-ending conversation.
Right? Yeah.
I mean, it was the question raised by the banana with tape. I don't remember. I think it was getting people down. Yeah. They were like,
it gets people riled up. Yeah.
But I think that's like the point though, with the banana thing especially.
Yeah. The creator commented on that, and he was like putting it in perspective with the other works of the artist, and he's actually always doing things of that.
Totally.
Yeah. So just kind of going back to you and the trajectory of Up Luv, do you see yourself doing another like abroad project, kind of like Sri Lanka? I saw mention, I didn't get time to research, but have you been to Japan for the project as well?
Yes, I've taken the project to Japan and recently to Mexico. Okay, wow, Mexico. That was the last place that I went to, which was really, really interesting. And then, obviously New York and Sri Lanka. But ideally, yes, I would like to go to another country with a project. I would like to, that might be an option with my partnership with the United Nations. Yeah. There may be opportunity for that this year, but
amazing.
At this moment,
What's been because you've listed off like quite a number of huge names that you've worked with. What's been your favorite kind of partnership or place or company or person that you've met or worked with?
So obviously the United Nations partnership was by far one of the most kind of like overwhelming.
That's amazing. How old are you? Sorry to interject.
I'm 25.
25. That's a lot to accomplish by 25. Yeah.
Thank you. I never really I feel like I haven't really had time to kind of even digest what's happened in the past 3 years. But I would say the United Nations partnership was obviously the most like overwhelming and crazy and like wow. Yeah, that was amazing. But then like other people I've worked with was really fun. So I worked with Gina Martin, who did the upskirting law, and we worked on a project together. That was really amazing. Who else have I worked with? My mind's like going blank. But basically, through Cheer Up Luv, I've been able to kind of work with brands like Apple and Nike.
Yeah.
And I did a really cool project with Adobe last year where they approached me about kind of diversifying their Adobe stock website.
Yeah.
Website? No, gallery.
There's stock images that
they're
they
stock
have?
images.
Wow,
So,
super interesting.
Yeah, so it's like Getty Images. They're those kind of stock image galleries. But Adobe, who they're like they're like a kind of design software company, if anyone doesn't know. They have their own stock gallery, and they wanted to do a project to coincide with the Women's FIFA World Cup about kind of getting more diverse stock images of women into like the sport kind of galleries. Because when you type in like footballer or whatever, tennis player, it's predominantly a lot of like white men pop up on the image searches of the galleries. So we did a project together where I photographed women working in the football sector, whether that was like, you know, radio presenters or trainers or footballers themselves, and I kind of photographed them. I collaborated with another photographer actually. We took two different sets of images. I worked with Milo Belgrove. He took his own photos and did a kind of project through like the male gaze, and I did it through sort of like the female gaze, and then we kind of, you know, put all of our photos on the Adobe stock gallery, and that was a really cool project.
That's super neat.
And I was approached for that because of obviously like my background with Cheer Up Luv and like kind of photography through the gaze of like women's rights and all of that kind of stuff. So it was a really good partnership on that.
That's super cool. And like I feel like for a lot of artists the kind of question is you've got your artistic goals, but you've also got to pay the bills and find commercial partnerships to work with, and that's like a really cool cross section. That
was like the ideal project. I was kind of like, what's going on? When that came my way, I was like, more of these, please. It was really, really something I was like really passionate about, which was, you know, like diversity and women's rights and photography and like all of these things all coming together. And it being around like the Women's FIFA World Cup as well. So that was like a really exciting thing to do.
Amazing. Well, I have like two questions left for you. One's a really, really big one, and I'm just kind of curious what your answer is. How do we, and it kind of brings it full circle, goes back to sexual harassment, Cheer Up Luv, but how do we solve sexual harassment as a society? What do we need to do in order to put a stop to it and end it? Will it ever end?
Big question.
I
mean, I hope it ends. I'm not sure if it will completely end in my lifetime, but if there can be like just a dent made, and how often and every day that it is experienced, then that would be a plus. I think it comes down to kind of implementing education from a really young age, speaking to young boys and girls about kind of like gender equality and like sexuality and sex education and all of these kind of things that do need to be introduced and spoken about from a really young age to kind of combat the like views that we've had for like centuries about kind of gender stereotypes and objectification of like the female body and all of these kind of things. And that really does have to be introduced at like a really young age, just to like get the conversation going. So I think it comes down to education. I think it comes down to like reporting and having structures in place that are going to support women. There's a really good campaign at the moment by Our Streets Now, which is to make street harassment illegal, which has also been a law that's changed in many countries in the EU. I'm pretty sure France and Amsterdam have a law to make, which is already in place for I'm losing my words. For street harassment to be illegal, and that's already had loads of kind of convictions, and it's been really really amazing. And so I think that would be really good here too. So to make street harassment illegal, just to have a mild deterrent anyway for people to do it. I mean,
Right.
lots of people say, "Oh, well, how will it be implemented?" Or like, you know, isn't it just going to be like, how is it going to be policed and all of these kind of things?
How have those other countries implemented it? Because I'm curious. Because do you know?
I'm not exactly sure how they've implemented it, to be perfectly honest.
Right. Because does it start? My question is, does it start with like verbal, or does it have to be physical, or like is there a line? Because it's really curious to me how you do enforce that.
It's actually a fine. I mean, in France, it's a fine, and it can be verbal as well.
Yeah.
But the difficulty of it is to having agents that can catch it in the moment, which never happens essentially.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure it's very effective at the moment. The way it
but
is
having it in
implemented.
writing is such a huge step.
It's amazing, and we have like a whole campaign in public transports, and I'm not sure how effective it has been, but it has definitely raised awareness. So that's always great.
I mean, if anything, just to kind of like reinforce the message that it shouldn't be happening is a good start.
Yeah.
To kind of like keep going as you're going, where it's like totally fine and legal and no repercussions whatsoever. Gives the impression that you're just like allowing for it to happen.
It's permitted. Yeah.
That it's permitted. You know, if throwing chewing gum on the floor is illegal, then why is it not illegal for someone to, you know, slap your bum when you're going on the tube? You know, like
Well, it's amazing that progress is being made, and hopefully it reaches more places sooner rather than later.
Hope so.
But yeah, my last question for you, and I ask every guest this as well, is I like to ask people for a recommendation of a book, of a film, of a song, not all those things, but just one thing. What have you been enjoying lately, or what would you like to recommend to audience members?
I've just finished a really good book called Invisible Women, which is all about the gender data gap, which is really, really interesting. So Invisible Women, I recommend that book. And also, I mean, everyone's probably already seen this, but the Sex Education series 2, so good. I mean, series 1 was amazing, but series 2 is also kind of like, yes, so good.
Yeah.
So work. Yeah.
So good. I watched that a few weeks back, and I was blown away by the cinematography, by the set design, by the script. It was such a quality production, and not to mention the messages that it puts out there.
Yeah.
It really, I can't recommend it highly enough as well. Really good stuff. Cool.
Definitely.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show today. We've enjoyed having you, enjoyed conversing with you. It's been really interesting to kind of get a behind-the-scenes look at what being a photojournalist means and looks like. Thank you so much. It's been great.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.